Hello YouTube, today we're going to be talking about my favorite state management solution or library for Angular, which is NGXS. NGXS is a fantastic state management tool for Angular which adopts the redux pattern. So if you have been using redux for your prior projects, you'll be feeling right at home. And without further ado, let's take a look at the installation process. As you may know, Angular just announced its latest major version, version 16, in which they introduced this concept of standalone components. And now that you can instantiate a brand new Angular project with the standalone flag, which means that all of your components could be standalone components, the installation process of third-party libraries might look a little different from how you would traditionally do it. So let's take a look at how to install the NGRX into a brand new Angular project. So with the Angular CLI tool, we're going to do ng new. Let's call it demo project with the standalone flag. I'm going to use SCSS. It's going to generate all the scaffolding codes. And if we go to the demo project directory and open the directory up with our IDE, you're going to see that if you go to src app and the app component, even your root app component is a standalone component and it doesn't have a module to it. It doesn't have an app module to it. So the question comes, if we want to incorporate or integrate this third-party library into our standalone Angular project, how should we go about doing it? If you take a look at the official documentation, it's telling us to npm install the package. Okay, so let's first of all do that first. We're going to do npm install ngxs/store --save. Okay, so we have finished installing the packages, but the question comes, if you take a look at this block, then in app.module.ts import the NGXS module. However, we have established that since we have used the standalone flag to instantiate our brand new Angular project, there is no app.module.ts. So in this case, the app.config.ts acts as the root module for us to import all the necessary providers. So in the application configures providers array, we're going to use a method, we're going to use a function that bootstraps all the third-party libraries that we would like to import. And the name of the function is importProvidersFrom. And inside of the arguments list, we're going to heed the advice of what the documentation is telling us to do. So we're going to do ngxs module.forRoot. And the first argument is going to be an array of the states. However, we have yet to create our own state, so we're going to be doing that next. And the next thing that I would like to show you guys is how to install the devTools, so that in the browser we can use this little tool, this UI tool, to inspect the current state of our Redux, of our NGXS store, as well as all the actions that has been dispatched. So the documentation is telling us to do npm install at ngxs/devtools plugin, and it's going to be save dev. Okay, let's wait for the package to finish installing. And same deal, inside of the importProvidersFrom, we're going to essentially treat this one as your root app.module.ts. and we're going to do, yep, NGXS redux devTools plugin module dot for root. And that's essentially all we need to do to set the dependencies up. And the next thing I would like to do is that I would like to set up the folder structure for our redux or NGXS operations. So the way I would like to do it is that I would like to create a brand new directory under src/app called store. So we're going to do make directory store. And some IDEs support the semantic folder icon. So in this case, it knows that, okay, store means that this is essentially the root directory for your redux operation. So you can see this, the folder, the directory has a little redux icon. And if we go to store, inside of the store directory, we're going to create two additional directories. We're going to have a actions directory and a states directory. And again, some IDEs, they automatically detect the semantic meaning of the directory and set some custom icon for the directory, and it looks really nice. And for argument's sake, let's say that we're going to create a state to store the currently logged in user's information. And the way I would like to set it up is I would like to move from the action to the state. So let's first go to the actions folder and create a file called user.action.ts. So the naming convention goes, all the action files is going to have this .action in their file name. Now open the user action ts file with the text editor. From here we can very quickly define the model of our user object. So we can do export interface user, and let's say we want the user object to have a username property, which is going to be a string, email property, which is also going to be a string, and that's it. This is essentially how our user objects is going to look like. And the way you would organize your actions is that you would organize them in namespaces. So we're going to export a namespace called user actions, and this is essentially the outer boundary of your actions, all of your actions that are related to this user state operation. And inside of your user actions namespace, you can have as many classes as you want, and each class, if you take a look at the official NGXS documentation, each action is essentially a class, which is going to have a static read-only property called type, which is the name of the action that you'll be seeing when you're using the Redux inspection tool. And inside of the constructor, typically you would have the way that I would set it up is you would have a property called payload, and that is essentially what you are writing into your store. So let's go ahead and set up one action that is going to register the currently logged in user to our store. So we're going to create a class called register logged in user. And inside of the class, remember the static read-only type property is going to be the name of our action. The naming convention, if you take a look at the documentation, you would have this square brackets delimiting the name of the state that this action will be affecting. So in our case, we're trying to do something to the user state. So it's going to what about the casing? Okay, so it's just capitalized. So it's going to be user state, and the name of the action is typically in alignment with the name of a class, the name of your class. So it's going to be register logged in user, and inside of the constructor we're going to define the payload. So we're going to use the shorthand to avoid saying this dot user equals to user. So we're going to do payload, and it's going to be of the type user, which we have already defined here as an interface. So this is essentially all the code that you will need for the action. Now that we have defined the action, let's go ahead and go to the states folder and define a user.state.ts. Open it up in the text editor. And NGXS is an opinionated library, meaning that it has its own recommended way of doing things, and I tend to follow it because I find it to be very clean, even though it's a little bit very object oriented in my opinion. But I find it to be very clean, very structured, and essentially provides you with a good consensus if you're working with multiple developers on a team. So the first thing you will need to do is that you will need to define an interface that serves as the model for your state. So in this case, our state is the user state, so we're going to call it user state model. And inside of this state model, we're going to define the necessary properties that this state is going to possess. So we already know that we have a, let's just call it logged in user, and we already know it's of the type user that we have defined in the action file. So in my opinion, the definition of this model shouldn't be here. In reality, it should be inside of a model directory. It should be right here. So yeah, let's quickly do the migration. Go to model directory, user.model.ts, open it up, and let's cut this type definition right here. User action is going to, yep, we need to insert the import statement here as well. So we have constructed the model for our state. Let's move ahead and use the state directive to start defining the state. And we're going to use the type assertion to let it know that this state is going to have these properties that we have defined here. It's going to take an object, and the name of the state is going to be the key. In the Redux world, we have a store and we have different slices for the store. So think of the name as the name of your slice. So in our case, the name is going to be user. And this key needs to be unique for each different state or slice. And we can provide it with a set of default values. And for the logged in user, it's going to be, we're going to do an empty object as user and cast it as the type user. And use the injectable decorator to let it know that this state allows dependency injection. And now we get to write the class definition for the user state. curly braces, and let me minimize the screen real estate and move the action file here. And here we can set up our state so that it reacts to different actions that we have defined in the actions folder. We're going to import the user actions namespace, and we only have one single action, so let's take care of that. So it's going to be user actions that register logged in user, and the function definition that goes underneath this action decorator is going to be the callback function that handles the operation once this action has been dispatched. And the naming convention typically is the camel case of the name of your action. So in our case, it's going to be register logged in user. That's our function name, and it takes in two arguments. The first argument is going to be the context of your state, and it's going to be of the type state context. It's going to be imported from the NGXS store, and the model of the state we have already defined here, which is going to be the user state model. And the second argument is going to be the action, and we already know it's going to be the user action dot register logged in user. And now we're going to implement the body of the function. And this part should be very intuitive for you if you have been using Redux. So essentially all we need to do is that we can call the ctx, the context, and we have two very frequently used methods. The patch state method is what I would prefer to use in this scenario. Patch state essentially overrides your state object's properties on a per property basis, whereas the set state is going to replace your entire state object in one go. So in this case, we're going to pass in an object, and the key is going to be the logged in user, and the value is going to be action.payload. And that's it. And to see all the code that we have written in action, let's quickly edit the file, implement a login button and have the login button dispatch some hard-coded user information value to the state so we can take a look. We're going to fast forward this part. And now let's talk about how to dispatch an action. And the way you would do it is that in your component class, in the constructor method, you would inject the store, which is imported from NGXS/store as a private value. And inside of the necessary method, or wherever you want to dispatch the action from, you would do this .store.dispatch. And because each action is a class, you need to use the new keyword to instantiate a new instance of the class. So it's going to be new user actions dot register logged in user. Remember, we have defined a model, so it's going to be username. Let's call it Frank. Email is going to be some arbitrary email. And that's it. If everything goes right, once you click on the login button, it's going to dispatch this brand new action with this value into your store. So let's take a look. We're going to ng-serve this app. And if we go to the browser with this port number, and open up the Redux inspector tool, and click on the login button, we can see that this action has been successfully dispatched. But the reason why it hasn't been written to our store or to the state is because in the app.config file, we need to add the state file that we have created to the for root method. Now that we have done that, if we restart the application again and click on the login button again, you can see that in the state we have written the logged in user to our store. And now let's talk about how to retrieve your state from your store and use it in your template file or your TS file. So the way you would go about doing that is in your component that you would like to retrieve the state from, you would need to use the, let's go to app component and use the select decorator provided by NGXS, retrieve our state. And we're going to do state, and we already know it has a user key which corresponds to the user state model. I think we need to import this. Yeah. And make it into an arrow function, and the slice of state that we would like to retrieve is the state.user.loggedInUser. And let's give it a name. Let's call it logged in user, and it's going to be an observable, and we're going to add the exclamation mark to assert that this thing is always going to be there, otherwise it's gonna throw some runtime error. And it's going to be an observable of the type user. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is how you define the type. And after you have done that, in the app components template file, you can do something like, and we can use the observable in this way. We can do logged in user and feed it into an async pipe, so it gets the latest value of the observable and wrapped it inside of a pair of parentheses and just do username. And now we have that set up. If we click on the login button, you can see that because we have written this user object into the store, it retrieves the latest value as an observable from the store and writes the value with the async pipe into the template file. And to retrieve the value of the logged in user as a value instead of an observable, the way you would do it is that you would declare a public property. I would personally call it logged in user val, and it's going to be of the type user inside of the constructor, or better yet, if you do on init and implement a NGInit function, you could subscribe to the logged in user observable, do something like assign the value of the latest value to the logged in user val, and for the sake of argument, you can immediately console log the value of the logged in user val, to see that we have successfully retrieved the logged in user as its latest value and have successfully stored it in our class level property. So that's it, guys. That's essentially all I have to share about NGXS. It's an amazing piece of state management library, and I hope you found this video to be informative. Bye.